sending earlier in the chat, I have no idea. Okay, so it's 5:01, so we're going to be starting now. I'm going to leave the chat open for a bit, and if it gets too rowdy over there, I will definitely close it. So yeah, as I was saying earlier, if you're just joining, welcome to our third week of anatomy and physiology. You may be expecting me to talk about plant physiology today, but actually I got a lot of requests after last week's session to talk more about some other human anatomy systems. So that's why I will go over these today instead of doing plant physiology. And also, in my own opinion, I feel like plant physiology is a lot more boring than human physiology, which is why I also thought it was a good idea. So we're going to be doing, again, 3 systems today. Last week we also did 3. So let's get started. But before we get started, I need to have an announcement. You guys probably also got this email about our first annual math tournament. Everyone is allowed to participate, not just the people signed up for Kid Teach Kid. So we have a math tournament, and it's going to be a little bit easier than AMC 10, but definitely harder than AMC 8. Because it's a little bit easier than AMC 10, it's going to be 25 questions in 60 minutes instead of 75 minutes. And we also wrote the problems ourselves, so it's not copied. Don't worry about that whole thing. We are going to allow you guys to start submitting your answers and taking the test starting from tomorrow at 7 o'clock. So make sure you have time for that. And the timing and like the window ends on Sunday at night. So make sure you figure out some hour time slot in between this weekend and do it. Okay, George is asking how we do it. That's a good question. I'm going to go over it right now. So you go to kidteachkid.org. So let me go to that. Yeah, it is a website time. So you will have to finish it before the timer ends on the website. Wait a second. Why is it not showing it? Let me refresh. Maybe it'll work better if I share screen from my computer. Let me see if it works. Oh, wait, actually, Rich changed the website just a few minutes ago. So here, you see this little tab called Math Contest. Wait, what? Oh, never mind. I think the website is good. Okay, well, anyway, you click on that, and tomorrow it should lead you to this page right here. The computer is kind of lagging, so. Wait, you guys can see. Let me redo this. Sorry, real quick. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. Give me like 1 minute. Okay, so now that my technical difficulties are fixed, basically all you do is go to kidteachkid.org and then there's a tab that says math contest, and then you just click on that and then it'll have all the rules, and then you just click start contest whenever you need to. So that's that. All right, so now we're gonna actually start. I was talking about this earlier that I'm gonna talk about more anatomy systems instead of doing plant physiology this week. So this week's systems are going to be skeletal, excretory, and endocrine. All right. So let's start. But if you weren't here last week, I wanted to talk to you about some resources that you can use to learn the rest of the body systems. There's a lot. I'm in no way able to cover every single one. So the rest of them you can learn by reading textbooks. The two that I suggest are Saladin and Vanders, or websites go on innerbody.com or wikipedia.com. So yeah, okay. Wikipedia is actually very reliable, in my opinion. Okay, anyway, so first we're going to start off with the skeletal system. Here is an overview of the skeletal system. I would suggest knowing the major bones in the body. So for example, you don't really need to know like the whole first lumbar vertebrae, the whole 12th rib, stuff like that. You don't need to know. But things like ulna, radius, hip bone, femur, patella, those should definitely know. Yeah, okay. So let's move on to the types of bones. The first type of bone we're going to cover is long bones. This sounds kind of self-explanatory, but it's more complicated than it seems. So anyone want to give me an example of a long bone in the body? So type it in the chat. Anyone would be fine. Here, I will go back to this diagram here. Fibia, femur, those are all correct. Femur, those are correct. Good job, everyone. Those are all right. So the long bone characteristics are the length is greater than the width. So it's kind of like a rectangle or string shaped or like a long tube shaped. But let me know, okay, you see these bones in the fingers, the metacarpals, and the bones in the toes, the metatarsals? Let me know in the chat if you think those are long bones or not. I'm seeing yes, maybe, no, yeses. Okay. Well, the answer would be yes. The reason is even though they're not long per se, they're not like that long, they still have a length greater than their width. So that's why they're still considered long bones. But on the other hand, our short bones are going to be the bones that are cuboid. So their length and their width are around the same. So an example of a short bone would be the carpals, so the bones in your wrist, the tarsals, the bones in your ankles, things like that. Those are short bones. Flat bones are the ones in your cranium, meaning like your skull, and basically they don't have like the traditional tube shape. They're more of like sandwiched, a layer of like, they're, okay, I don't know how to say this besides they're flat. As you can see in this diagram here, you can see that the skull is consisted of flat bones. Other possible flat bones are your ribs. Okay, and then we have sesamoid bones. Those are the ones that are the shape of a sesame seed. They are kind of ovalish, but they're small and they're between tendons. You should ask, would the kneecap be a short bone? Not necessarily, because the kneecap or the patella is a bone that is between tendons, and the bone between tendons are by definition sesamoid bones. And also it's like rounded shaped, so it's not of a cuboid shape, which is why they would not be classified as short bones. Okay, and lastly, I think in my opinion the easiest would be irregular, because they look very different from your normal bone shape. So for example, the pelvis, as you can see in here, it's like a heart shaped, which is why it would be irregular. And vertebrae, they have like these little spines and like little holes inside. So that's why it's regular. Okay, Amy asked, what is the spine? Well, the thing is, the spine is not one bone. The spine is consisted of smaller bones called vertebrae, and the vertebrae are irregular bones. So hopefully that answered your question. All right, next we're going to move on to the structure of long bones. There are three main parts that you need to know. There are not 7 vertebrae. So there are, wait, Okay, there are 7 cervical vertebrae. Wait, I can't remember the exact numbers. I'm kind of rusty, but there's definitely more than 7. There's 7 just in the neck. So go ahead and, if you are interested in that, go ahead and Google that or something. Also, please stop spamming everyone. I'm going to pause the chat. Okay, anyway, there are 3 main areas of the bone. The epiphysis is the very tip, as you can see in this diagram. The metaphysis is the region between the tip and the middle. So the middle would be the diaphysis, and the middle would be what people would say would be the shaft of the bone. So what's important about the bone is that you can see in the epiphysis and metaphysis that the bone is spongy, and there's like lots of holes, and inside those holes are the red bone marrow. And the red bone marrow is where your body has stem cells, and these stem cells are used to produce various other organs and tissues of your body. So that's very important. And you can see in the metaphysis, there's this little line called the epiphyseal line. So we all know that as we grow, our bones get longer, or our long bones get longer at least, and we get taller. And the reason behind this is the cartilage in the epiphyseal disc, which when you're younger is called the epiphyseal disc instead of the epiphyseal line. When you're younger, the cartilage in this area divides a lot. So as it divides, your epiphyseal disc will move upward and upward, allowing your bone to get longer. And when you're older, so when you're past 18, the cartilage in the epiphyseal disc will begin to calcify. By calcify, I mean turn into bone. And once it turns into bone cells themselves can't divide, so they can't lengthen anymore. So that's why once people are past a certain age, like 18 or 19-ish, they stop getting taller. That's because their epiphyseal discs have all transformed into a line. Okay. Next, we have compact bone. Compact bone are the bones that you see on the side of the diaphysis. They are not filled with air bubbles. They are more structured. Okay, next we're going to move on to bone microstructure, and what that means is if you zoom in, basically, if you zoom in onto the bone, what you'll see. So what you need to know right off the bat is what bone is made of. Bone is made of organic material and inorganic material. So the organic material is the collagen, and collagen really provides that shape for the bone. And the calcium matrix provides the hardness of the bone. So the calcium matrix is made out of hydroxyapatite. And if you remember from our first biology class, hydroxyapatite, well, I didn't explicitly say this in our first class, but hydroxyapatite is made of 3 ions: calcium ion, phosphate ion, phosphate ion, and also the what is it called again? Hydroxide ion. Okay, so calcium, phosphate, and hydroxide. Those are combined together to make the calcium matrix. Okay, next we have osteoblasts, are the cells that create the bone itself. So they sweep in calcium from the bloodstream, and they settle that calcium on the bone to create like bone tissue, so bone matrix. That's how your bones get built up, which is by the osteoblasts. And on the other hand, osteoclasts are used to get rid of bone, like it is used to break down bone. So increased osteoclast activity would mean increased blood calcium, because more calcium is going from your bones into the blood. Okay, next we have osteocytes, which are bone cells. They don't really move. They are stuck in these little pouches inside the bone, but they can still communicate each other via their extensions. Okay, next we have osteogenic cells. They are basically stem cells that can give rise to osteoblasts whenever your body needs to build up bone. And I think one interesting example to note is that tennis players or sport players, those who have a lot of like trauma at them all the time. Oh, Isha asked, what does the prefix osteo mean? Yes, it does mean bone, correct. Lucas asked, what is cartilage? We will talk about that in just a minute, so hang tight. Okay, anyway, as I was saying, people who play a certain sport, for example, if they have a lot of trauma to, let's say, their arm, like they get hit their arm all the time, if you take an x-ray, you'll notice that the bones in their arms will be very thick. And the reason behind this is a lot of osteogenic cells have divided into osteoblasts. The osteoblasts will create more bone to help protect that place that is always under trauma. So yeah, that is the reason why sometimes sports players will have thicker and stronger bones. Okay, next we will talk about the exact diagram of what we talked about in the last slide. So as you can see here, you can see the various osteocytes in yellow, and the fundamental unit of a compact bone is the osteon. So these little circular things are osteons. So inside you'll see these little circles inside the osteon as well, called the lamellae, and you can see on the outside there's a layer called the periosteum, and it's compared in its cohesive with the compact bone with fibers called Sharpie's fibers, things like that. And you can also see that there's a lot of blood vessels inside your bone. So your bone is not just some lifeless thing with calcium and collagen. There's actually blood going through it, nutrients. Your bone cells, your osteocytes also need nutrients. That's why there's a lot of blood vessels as well. Okay, next we're going to talk about cartilage, as Lucas was asking about earlier. So there's 3 types of cartilage. The top is called hyaline. The second one is called elastic, and then the bottom one is fibrocartilage. So when you think cartilage, most people will think about hyaline cartilage because cartilage is found between your joints to help lubricate or prevent friction during movement. So the type of cartilage that covers your joints is the hyaline cartilage, and also the cartilage in your trachea and your larynx, which is your voice box. That also is hyaline cartilage. Okay, Isha asks, do bones have all 3? No. Well, no. So the reason behind this is not every bone has necessarily cartilage. For example, your skull bones do not have cartilage at all. But for example, your upper arm, it has cartilage because it needs to help cushion the sides. Also, your knee has a lot of cartilage to make sure that whenever you fall, you don't completely make your joints rub on each other. Okay, but that's the job for hyaline cartilage. Next, we'll talk about elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage is mostly there to ensure structure. So, for example, your external ear, that's all elastic cartilage. The tip of your nose is elastic cartilage. It doesn't necessarily have much of a functional role, but it does help ensure that your certain areas of your body are flexible. So yeah. Next, we will talk about fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage is much tougher than elastic and hyaline. A lot of the times it's used for scar formation inside various parts of your body. David asked, what cartilage in sharks? I am not 100% sure, but I think it's elastic. I'm pretty sure it's elastic. I'm not 100% sure. Okay, let's move on to the next, which is bone development. Don't worry too much about memorizing this stuff, but the 2 main types of bone development that you need to know are intramembranous, and this is the one that you see here. Intramembranous is when bones are created from a single layer of mesenchyme. Oh, Lucas asked me to go to slide 11, sure. I'll just talk about it as you look at this. So a mesenchyme is basically a layer of primitive material in your body, to put it simply. So next, on top of the mesenchyme, there will be accumulation of calcium and phosphate or hydroxyapatite crystals. And once it accumulates, it begins to calcify, meaning that harden. And then blood vessels will also perforate it, and then there will also be osteoclasts in the middle trying to create these holes for the blood vessels to perforate. And then on the outside, there will be compact bone. So intramembranous is used for bone development of the cranium, so the bones in the skull, or other flat bones as well. But on the other hand, we have the more common type of bone development, which is endochondral development. And this is formation from cartilage. So whenever you hear chondral or con or some CHON, something like that, think cartilage. So chondrocytes, cartilage cells, things like that. So as you can see here, there's a cartilage mold in the beginning, and then in the center, there will be an ossification center, and ossification just means creation of bone. So bone will be created in the middle, and then there will be blood vessel perforation, and then on the sides, there will be the secondary ossification center, and at the end, a long bone will be formed. And notice these little discs, those are places where the cartilage did not be, oh, sorry, I will go back to the previous slide. Those are the areas when the cartilage is not ossified. So that forms the epiphyseal disc, as I was saying in the beginning, where the epiphyseal disc helps a person grow in length. Okay, hopefully that is enough. And also don't worry if you're unable to copy this stuff. All this information will be uploaded on the Kid Teach Kid website, so you can always refer to that. Are different kinds of bones formed by different kinds of bone development? Good question, Max. So flat bones are formed by intramembranous. And if you remember the different types of bone, we have long, short, flat, irregular, sesamoid. So long bones are formed by endochondral, and flat bones are formed by intramembranous. Those are the most important types. And the more common type of bone development would be endochondral. So hopefully that answers your question. Let me check Q&A. What is yellow bone marrow? Oh, I'm so sorry, I did not go over that. We're gonna go over that in a future slide. Blood is made in bones. Yes, for the most part, blood is made in bones. Next we're gonna talk about bone marrow, as I was saying earlier. So first we're gonna talk about red bone marrow. This is where hematopoiesis occurs, which is the creation of blood cells. And red bone marrow is found in all these places, skull, vertebrae, ribs, etc., and also on the edges or the epiphysis of long bones, if you remember from our first few slides. And as you can see, I wrote here that in a baby, most bone marrow is red, then some transitions into yellow into adulthood. However, in extreme circumstances like malnutrition, yellow bone marrow can change back into red bone marrow. So that's something you should probably know. It's a very interesting thing to look into. And the red bone marrow is found in spongy bone. Okay, next we'll talk about yellow bone marrow. Yellow bone marrow is not as interesting as red bone marrow. It's mostly fats, but it's used for energy storage. All right, next we're gonna talk about joints. Oh, is the bone marrow the spongy bone, or are they different? Isha, that's a good question. The spongy bone refers to the actual structure of the bone, but the bone marrow itself is found inside the spongy bone. So if you remember in this diagram here, you can see that the spongy bone is referring to the bone, and the bone marrow is found inside, is the red stuff found inside the bone marrow, or the spongy bone. Okay, next, joints. Here are the three main classifications of joints: fibrous, which are immovable; cartilaginous, which are semi-movable; and synovial, which are freely movable. So here's a more complete classification. Don't worry about knowing all of this. Just have a good idea. But I think the most important thing for you to know about joints is synovial joints. So synovial joints are the most freely movable joints, and here you can see the 6 different types of synovial joints. Okay, and I asked, so if blood is made in the bone, does it start with oxygen? So if it does it get the oxygen from the previous blood? Okay, that's a good question, but for the most part, blood is made by stem cells. You can see on the right of this diagram here, everything stems from a hemocytoblast, and then it just keeps going down and down, but they don't actually get their oxygen until they are mature. So after blood is mature, they have a certain protein on them called hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is used to carry oxygen. So whenever these blood cells go to the lungs, they can bind to oxygen, and then they can bring the oxygen to various parts of the body. But in the formation of blood cells themselves, they don't necessarily need to use oxygen to create it. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question a little bit. But anyway, we're gonna go back to joints. Is it true that people don't have kneecaps for 4 years after they are born? Asked Bella. I'm not sure exactly the number of years, but that actually makes sense. The reason is the patella, which is the kneecap bone, is formed inside the tendons of the is formed inside the tendons due to like, well, it's not, I'm not completely sure about the exact mechanisms, but it's formed inside the tendons of the knee. So it does make sense that people won't be able to have enough calcification there until after a certain amount of time. So I think that's probably not a myth, but I'm not sure about the exact amount of time. 4 years seems like a lot, but I'm not sure. Okay, next, these joints, I'm pretty sure they're quite self-explanatory. I'd say the most important one is, there's not really a most important, but some very important ones are ball and socket joints, which you will find in your elbow and your hip. You can move anywhere you want with these ball and socket joints. And then another one that's very noteworthy is the saddle joint. And there's very few saddle joints in your body. The most important one is the one between your thumb, like the bottom of your thumb. So this bottom of your thumb, it can move so that your thumb can touch your pinky. That's why humans have opposable thumbs. Okay, next, any questions about joints? No? Okay, moving on to bone diseases. So fractures, you should probably know about the types of fractures. I'm not going to go over each specific one since they're kind of self-explanatory, but I guess know that comminuted fractures are formed by compression. Spiral fractures are formed by tension or like twisting, torsion, and green stick fractures are when when it does not completely go through your bone. And it's more common in children because their bones are not completely formed correctly yet. I'm not going to go over all these diseases since we're kind of running short on time, but I want to talk about osteoporosis in particular. Osteoporosis, there's not really much of symptoms for osteoporosis. Mostly occurs in older women. The reason why it's in women is because older women don't have the hormone, as much of the hormone estrogen. And estrogen actually helps with the strength of the bones. So whenever estrogen is depleted, their bones will get less dense and less strong, which is why osteoporosis is more common in older women. Yeah, and the most obvious symptom, I'd say, of osteoporosis is that people who have it are more likely to get fractures. Okay, Max asks, what is the relationship between osteoporosis and osteopenia? Well, osteoporosis is when the bone density gets less. Well, okay, well, penia just means like a decrease in something. This is a good question. I'm actually not completely sure. Sorry about that. But I'd say the more common one would be osteoporosis because that is a decrease in bone density and there's a lot of people who have it. So yeah. All right, next we're gonna move on to the excretory system. Oh, David asks it's not osteo. Oh, wait, there's no otheo. There's only osteo for bones. Okay, next we're gonna move on to the excretory system. And for the most part, the excretory system I will go back, my bad. For the most part, the excretory system refers to the kidneys, the urinary system. There are also other parts of the excretory system, like your lungs. Your lungs can take out carbon dioxide. Your skin is also a part of the excretory system, as in it secretes sweat, which contains waste materials. But the main one would be the urinary system with the kidneys and the nephrons and stuff like that. So let's move on. So here you can see a diagram of the excretory system on the left, and then a diagram of the kidney on the right. I'm not gonna worry too much about the anatomy. I'm mostly gonna worry about the physiology, as in how stuff works. So first, let's talk about kidney structure. This is the most we're gonna talk about. So as you can see, the cortex is the outer layer, and then the medulla is the inner layer. That's the main classification of the kidney. And then there are more specific classifications like the renal columns. The renal columns are the spaces between the renal pyramids. So you can see the renal pyramids here. The spaces between those are the columns you can see here. Okay, next we have the renal pyramids, as I already showed you guys. And then the minor calyx are those little U-shaped or C-shaped little things that mark the connection between the red and the yellow. So that's the minor calyx. Okay, George's asking me to open the chat, but if there are spammers, I'm gonna close it. Yeah, okay. So next we have the renal pelvis, and the pelvis itself is just like the big like inner portion of here. So that's the renal pelvis. Any questions? Someone is asking if I'm allowed to talk about the reproduction system. I mean, I'm talking about the endocrine system today, which has a little bit about the reproduction system, but not much, so don't worry. Okay, next we will talk about the functional unit of the kidney, which is the nephron. The nephron is a very complicated structure. It's very multifunctional, but its primary function is, well, there's three. There are three primary functions: filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. We'll talk about that in the next slide. But in this slide, we're going to talk about the various parts of the nephron. Okay, so starting from this little C-shaped thing on the left, that's called the glomerular capsule, also called the Bowmans Capsule. So what that does is it allows the blood from the afferent arteriole to filter liquids into the Bowmans capsule. So a lot of the things won't get filtered in. A lot of big stuff like blood cells will not get filtered in. Large proteins will not get filtered in either. Just liquids and ions will get filtered in. So like glucose, sodium ions, chloride ions, hydrogen ions, things like that. Those will all get filtered in the glomerular capsule. So now if you move down the glomerular capsule, you'll see the proximal convoluted tubule. The proximal convoluted tubule is where a lot of reabsorption occurs. And before we dig deep into the proximal convoluted tubule, I just wanted to let you know why exactly we have nephrons and why exactly we have kidneys. So your body has a lot of fluid, and your kidneys will help get rid of the bad stuff in your fluid. But it can't just get rid of all the water along with the fluid. It needs to filter out. It needs to go through the entire filtration system of the nephron. So reabsorption means that it absorbs the useful things like ions back into the body, and it will secrete unnecessary ions like drugs and lots of acid ions into your urine. So that is why. Okay. Okay, Isha's asking, why are there no cell bodies or organelles? Well, the thing is, the nephron is not a cell. The nephron is a functional unit of the kidney. It's made up of various different cells, and it's just not zoomed in enough for you to see. Okay, anyway, so the proximal convoluted tubule is where all the sodium, glucose, lots of ions will get reabsorbed and sent back into your bloodstream. And after it passes this test, it will go down to the loop of Henle, which you can see here is this long loop going down and up. And the loop of Henle is where the nephron will regulate the pH and water supply. So in the loop of Henle, a lot of water will get reabsorbed back into your body so that you don't have so much urine. Okay, and as you go up this loop of Henle, you will see the distal convoluted tubule up here. The distal convoluted tubule is where more water is reabsorbed, more salts are reabsorbed. It's just another like phase of reabsorption. And finally, you go to the collecting duct. That's where all the nephrons will conglomerate together and go into one of these minor calyx things that you can see in this diagram picture. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense about nephrons. Oh, someone asked, can I talk about kidney stones? Sure, I guess, but it's going to be a brief overview. So kidney stones are when too much calcium conglomerates inside the nephron. So there's whenever your body is filtering calcium, there's lots of salts that'll conglomerate together, and too much calcium will cause the creation of a kidney stone. Basically, that is the creation, how kidney stones work. And they're extremely painful. Yeah, I think a lot of the times people will need to get surgery to correct their kidney stones. Okay, Lucas asked more about nephrons. Oh, actually, I'm going to answer Max's question first, since it's easier to answer. Proximal convoluted tubule, the abbreviation is PCT. The distal convoluted tubule, the abbreviation is DCT. So pretty self-explanatory. Okay, Lucas, I will explain just an overview again. Basically, the formation of urine is what a nephron does. Your body has a lot of fluids, and there's a lot of wastes inside the fluids. So the brief overview of what a nephron does is that it filters out the wastes into the urine and reabsorbs all the necessary ions and water back into their body. So yeah, and all of these parts, the Bowmans Capsule, PCT, loop of Henle, DCT stuff, that's all part of the overarching goal of excreting bad stuff and reabsorbing good stuff in the way. Okay, so 3 main functions. I already touched on this earlier, but filtration of fluids in the Bowmans capsule. So all the blood plasma will get filtered into the Bowmans capsule. And then the second step would be reabsorption of ions and nutrients, which is the job of the PCT and the DCT and the loop of Henle. So sodium ions, glucose ions, things like that, those will all be reabsorbed back into the body because those are necessary things that your body needs, and you don't want to put all of that into your urine and excrete it. And step 3 is secretion of things like hydrogen ions and drugs. Those are the things that your body wants to get rid of. So your body wants to get rid of these bad things into your urine for the excretion of them. Don't worry too much about the other functions, but one thing you should remember is that your kidney also secretes a hormone called erythropoietin. Oh, don't worry about that. Just ask as many questions as you want, Lucas. Okay, anyway, is a hormone called erythropoietin that controls red blood cell formation, or hematopoiesis, as I was talking about earlier in the bone marrow. Okay, next, we're going to talk about the countercurrent exchange. Actually, this is a little bit complicated to understand. Oh, okay. Radhika asked, if the kidney is so important, why do people donate them? That is a great question. That will bring me into talking about this whole thing about the kidney. So the kidney is very, very cool, as in whenever you have one kidney gone, the other kidney can completely take over the function of the kidney that was originally gone. So let's say one person had a kidney transplant and they donated their kidney. Then in enough time, the other kidney will filter more and work faster at a more efficient pace, so that that one kidney can completely take over what it took for 2 kidneys to do, which is why the kidneys are so cool. George is asking what would happen during that time. Actually, nothing. The person can't even feel it. There's not much of a side effect, I'd say. That's because the kidneys are able to just take over completely, which I think is so cool. And that brings me into another point, which is the talk about kidney failure. So kidney failure occurs when the kidneys don't work as well. Basically, they lose their function. But what's really cool about kidney failure is that you can't really feel it. There's like no symptoms until it's critical. So even if your kidneys have lost like half of their function, you can't even feel it. But once they've lost like 80% or 70%, that's when you start to have a lot of side effects. Is kidney failure common? It's not that common, but I'm not completely sure. You may just want to Google that and see how many cases there are. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about the countercurrent exchange system. Basically, this is a way for your kidney to regulate pH and ion concentration. So as you can see, as it goes down the loop of Henle, the amount of ions in the, this might be kind of hard to explain, but the water, hold on. Oh, okay, never mind. I know this. Okay, so basically the concentration of ions is what these number depicts. So at the top, the concentration of ions is very little. But as it goes down, it'll increase to the max of 1200. And then as it goes up, you can see that these sodium potassium chloride carriers are pumping the ions into the interstitium, and then the interstitium will carry it back into the body. So is just what a countercurrent exchange system is. Yeah, so as it goes down, concentration of ions increases, and it goes up, it decreases. So that's basically it for countercurrent exchange. All right, next we'll talk about hormones and how hormones have to do with kidneys. Okay, so the first hormone we're going to talk about is antidiuretic hormone. And we're going to go more into hormones in the next section, which is about an endocrine system. So the antidiuretic hormone occurs when a person is at a lack of water, meaning that they need to increase water supply in their body. So then antidiuretic hormone will be activated, causing water channels to open up in the collecting duct and causing the kidney to reabsorb more water into the body. The reason for this is because normally a person secretes a certain amount of urine, which has a lot of water in it, but whenever antidiuretic hormone is applied to the kidney, more water will be reabsorbed back into the body and the person will have a less than normal supply of urine, causing conservation of water. Okay, next we'll talk about aldosterone. This is when there may be too much water, or the concentration of salt in the body is not enough. This is when aldosterone is secreted, and in the distal convoluted tubule, more salt than normal will be reabsorbed back into the body, and less salt will appear in the urine. So notice how these occur when your body is at a certain abnormal stage, and these hormones exist to bring your body back into homeostasis. So that's the reason for antidiuretic hormone and aldosterone. The renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system is a system to regulate blood pressure. Just know that. Basically, renin causes the activation of angiotensin. Angiotensin causes vasoconstriction, meaning constriction of the blood vessels. And aldosterone has to do with salt again. But if you want to learn more about the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, feel free to Google that. I think Wikipedia has a good article on that. Okay, so we have around 18 minutes. I want to leave around 5 minutes at the end to ask for any questions. So we're going to move on to the endocrine system. By the way, any questions about the excretory system? I don't see any, so we're just going to move on. We're not going to go too in depth about the endocrine system, but I do want to cover the organs and the hormones. So first, we're going to cover the organs of the endocrine system. So starting from the top, we have what's the pineal gland. And the pineal gland regulates your body's sleep-wake cycle by secreting a hormone called melatonin. Next, we have the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. These two are the controllers of your entire endocrine system. So the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland what to do, and the pituitary gland secretes its own hormones and also can send signals to other glands of the endocrine system to secrete certain hormones as well. So going down, we see the thyroid and the parathyroid glands. So that little butterfly-shaped thing, that's the thyroid gland. The thyroid secretes two main hormones, T3 and T4. Those hormones are used to regulate metabolism, basically. So regulating your body's working pace. And you can't see the parathyroid gland because those are very small. There are 4 little dots on the edges of the thyroid gland. And what they do is they regulate calcium amount in your blood. So it has to do with the bones, and they secrete a hormone that's called parathyroid hormone. So pretty self-explanatory there. And next we go down to the thymus. The thymus is involved in T cell maturation. So that's the primary function of the thymus. And T cells, if you remember, are going to be immune cells that help fight infections in your body. So going down, we see the pancreas, and the pancreas's primary function is regulating the concentration of sugar in your body by secreting 2 main hormones, insulin and glucagon. So insulin is meant to decrease the concentration of sugar in your body, and glucagon is meant to increase it. Next, we have the adrenal glands on top of the kidney. And I actually did not realize this until not that long ago, but renal means kidney and adrenal means it's on top of the kidney. So that's why it's called the adrenal gland. So the adrenal gland's main function is to regulate the fight or flight response. So whenever you're super nervous, your kidney or your adrenal glands will start to release epinephrine and norepinephrine and regulate your body's sympathetic nervous system to increase your heart rate, increase blood pressure, increase sweat secretion, things like that, so that you're in this alert stage. Okay, going down, we have the various reproductive organs. For the male, this is the testes that secretes testosterone. In the female, we have the ovary that secretes estrogen, and the placenta occurs during pregnancy. Normally, a woman does not have a placenta. Okay, moving on to hormones. So what is a hormone? Hormones are chemical messengers created by a tissue and moved by the circulatory system to change the activities of certain cells in other tissues. These cells are known as target cells. So as I was saying in the previous slide, our body has lots of hormones, and what they do, there's different functions, but a main feature of hormones is that they are carried by the blood and they move slowly for slow responses. So for example, puberty is a slow response. T-cell maturation is a slow response. The sleep-wake cycle of the body is a slow response. The hormones are involved in slow responses of the body rather than quick, fast responses like nerve cell, like neurons, things like that. So, okay, on the right, we see three main classifications of hormones based on their chemical structure: amines, peptides, and steroids. So amine hormones are small. They are made of modified amino acids. If you remember, I talked about amino acids in our first class. Peptide hormones are made of various amino acids linked together. So in here on the right, you see oxytocin, made by many amino acids such as glycine, leucine, proline, cysteine, aspartame, glutamine, things like that. And then the final one is steroid hormones, that is made of fats, hydrocarbons to be exact. And steroid hormones are hydrophobic, meaning that they do not mix well with water. Meanwhile, amine and peptide hormones do mix well with water. So that's something to keep in mind. So they are hydrophilic, and steroid hormones are hydrophobic. Okay, so here is a little overview of everything I talked about in the slide 30 about what glands secrete what hormones. So some specific ones you should probably know are that the hypothalamus produces antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, which is what I talked about in the excretory system. The pituitary gland secretes growth hormone, which is the hormone that triggers puberty. And for a person to have a growth spurt. So that's all caused by the growth hormone. Things like oxytocin is also released by the pituitary gland, and that's for birth and stuff like that. Okay, moving to the right, we have parathyroid glands secrete parathyroid hormone. So parathyroid hormone is really important in the bone matrix. So if I remember correctly, I think this is right. Parathyroid hormone, wait. I can't remember if parathyroid hormone is involved in the buildup or degradation of bones, but I forgot. You can just Google that. I forgot. But yeah. And then there is also erythropoietin in the kidney, as I was talking about earlier. And then there's insulin and glucagon in the pancreas. Insulin increases the uptake of sugar, meaning it decreases sugar concentration, while glucagon increases sugar concentration by decreasing the uptake. So for example, if you're exercising a lot and your body is running out of fuel, then the glucagon hormone will increase blood supply or sugar supply in your blood. And then of course we have the adrenal glands secreting epinephrine and norepinephrine for the fight or flight response, and then the ovaries and the testes secreting the sex hormones, also called the androgens. The estrogen would be in females and testosterone would be in males. So any questions about hormones and where they're secreted? Anonymous, asked, how many hormones do we have? If you're talking about how many types of hormones, a lot, like a lot of hormones. And it's not just these that in the endocrine system. in the hormone that secrete hormones. There are also a lot of hormones in the digestive system, respiratory system, circulatory system. So there's actually way more than what's just listed on here. So I would encourage you to look at that later if you have time or if you're interested. So before we end this session, I just wanted to talk about feedback loops. And feedback loops are not specific to the endocrine system. They are honestly present in every aspect of the body. So the negative feedback loop is the most common type. So here's an example of a negative feedback loop. So whenever you're cold, your body will shiver, and the shivering will increase heat, decreasing the amount of coldness that you feel. So you'll get more warm. So that's why it's negative. It's once you have a certain stimulus, a certain action in your body will cause the stimulus to decrease so that you maintain homeostasis. Meanwhile, if your body temperature increases, you will begin to sweat, and that will cool your body down, causing your body temperature to return to normal. So that would be a negative feedback loop. On the other hand, we have a positive feedback loop, and positive feedback loops are a lot less common than negative feedback loops. I will, if Error keeps spamming, I'll kick him out. So for example, if you have a blood clot or if you have a wound, then the platelets will secrete various chemicals that trigger each other to amplify the potential of the blood clot. So that is an example of a positive feedback loop. Notice that there's a stimulus, and then that stimulus goes back to that stimulus to increase that stimulus so that you increase the potential of a response. Another example of the positive feedback loop, since it's a lot more elusive, would be the example of nursing a baby. So whenever a baby is nursing, that will cause more hormones in the mother's body to secrete more milk for the baby. So that would be an example of a positive feedback loop because something is causing something to go back to it and secrete more. And on the bottom, you can see examples of positive and negative feedback loops that do not have to do with the body. So you can see if you enjoy playing music, you'll be motivated to play a lot of music, and you'll get better at playing music, which will cause you to love playing music even more. So that would be an example of a positive feedback loop. On the other hand, if you dislike playing music and you have no motivation to play music, you'll play it very little, and there will be no improvement, and that will cause you to dislike music as well. So that would be a positive versus a negative feedback loop. Okay, so that would conclude our biology class today. Any other classes or any other questions about anything I talked about today in the 3 body systems that we covered? No questions? We covered a lot of information today. If I went too fast, I'm really sorry. But if you missed something, the recording and the PowerPoint will all be posted on the Kid Teach Kid website, and so will the homework. Yeah, and remember, just by attending this class, you have earned points. And if you do homework, you'll earn more points. Oh, by the way, thank you. No problem. It's my pleasure to teach. David, if you want to learn more about kidney stones, just Google it. Wikipedia has a good article as usual. Or you can read the part about kidney stones in various textbooks. And thank you guys all for coming so much. I thank you guys so much. How many points? I can't remember. I think it was 10 points for attending a class. And keep in mind keep on the lookout for the next special session that we'll be hosting. Rich will be hosting that special session. It's a special conference talking about our experiences in certain competitions, and you'll be able to ask your questions, and we'll be able to give you a lot of advice and feedback based on our own experiences. So Rich will be talking about making Math Counts Nationals and how he did so well. I think he got like 8th place or something in Nationals. So bring your questions, and Rochen will also be there because he also made Nationals once. So also, if you are interested, please join our math contest that I was talking about in the earlier. So the actual contest will be this weekend, and we highly suggest you enter. There will be a lot of cool prizes plus points, and yeah, thank you all for, so Anna asked, how do we know that we attend? So you'll have to fill out like a little form when you submit with your name and email and all that stuff. So that's how we'll figure out. And then we'll give you points. If you attend, you get plus 15 points. So remember, if you have a lot of points, you will get to attend special sessions, and also you will have your name featured. You'll get some books. You'll get some really cool stuff. So yeah, try to strive for as many points as you can. David asks, is there a class after this? No, there's no class for today. Today, this class was the last one, but tomorrow from 2 to 6, there's a class for every single hour. And one more thing before we leave, Rochen, he is holding a special advanced physics class on Sunday night from 5:30 to 6 at Central Time. So if you're interested, you can definitely attend. Okay, thank you so much for coming. It is my pleasure to teach you guys. Have a great day and have a great weekend, and I hope you attend our special sessions and our contest. Bye. Oh, it's at 5:30 to 6, whoever asked that. Okay, bye.